Well, hello everybody and welcome to Protecting Biodiversity. This is part of Protecting Our Planet Day 2024, or POP24 as we like to call it. And I'm Hermione Cockburn. I am your live host for this session, and I'm speaking to you now from POP Mission HQ here at Dynamic Earth Science Centre and Planetarium in Edinburgh. Now, I know it doesn't look like that. I've got a wonderful picture of the planet behind me, but I'm here live from Dynamic Earth, and we're going to be going out to all sorts of places across the UK, finding out about some of the most amazing biodiversity projects that are taking place. So what have we got coming up? Well, we've got a live Q&A towards the end of the session. Oh, now what you might have seen there is that my backdrop has changed. Now I've been transported to the Scottish Highlands, and this beautiful image that I've got now behind me will all make sense later on in the session. So yeah, we've got a live Q&A. So as you watch this session, as questions occur to you, do make sure that you're putting them in the chat, and we'll be throwing them live to all our expert contributors. In that chat, you can also look out for links and places to get further resources to find out more about biodiversity. Now, to start things off, we've got a very special guest who's going to be telling us about what biodiversity really is, what it means, and who we're going to be meeting in the session. So I am absolutely delighted to hand over to none other than wildlife champion and TV presenter extraordinaire, Chris Packham. Chris couldn't be with us live, but he sent us this recorded film just a few days ago. So let's begin. Over to you, Chris.
Hello, Chris Packham here, in a green coat, standing in front of some green trees out in the wild. And this is the way I like it. Not necessarily wearing a green coat, but being out in the wild. Because everything out here that creeps, crawls, slithers, bites and stings is a mate of mine. I like all life. Now, when I was younger, what I used to do is have favourite animals. And I used to worship those animals. I'll tell you a few of them. Firstly, I worshipped bats. And then it was grass snakes, then it was otters, then it was kestrels. And what I would do is I would look at all of these animals in isolation. It's as if I would almost put them on a pedestal. I wouldn't think about the rest of the world. If I was thinking about otters, I wouldn't be thinking about eagles or dolphins or gorillas. I'd just be thinking about otters. And I would think otters are great. But the world doesn't work like that. Otters, kestrels, grass snakes, bats don't live in isolation. They are all, believe it or not, intrinsically intertwined with one another. They are connected, and they are connected in a system which is dynamic, meaning that it doesn't always stay the same. Some things eventually become extinct, but other things become new species. There's the dynamism. But it's harmonious, it works, it's functional, and therefore it's even more beautiful than those individual animals on their own. So for all of this to work, you don't just need the trees. You need the caterpillars that eat them and the birds that eat the caterpillars and the bigger birds that eat those. You need an ecosystem. And when you've got an ecosystem, you need as much of the life that can live there, living there. And that brings me to the big B word, biodiversity. People like me love biodiversity, but what is it? Well, biodiversity is simply the number of different living things that live in a given place at a given time. It's a richness of life. Now, you may therefore think that people like myself always want to have a massive biodiversity, big numbers, but it can't always be like that. You might have big numbers here in a lush piece of woodland where there's lots of jobs for animals to do, plenty of opportunities, but what about if you're in a desert? There's not so many opportunities. There's hardly any plants to eat. There's hardly any water. There, the biodiversity is bound to be smaller. What we're interested in when it comes to protecting that biodiversity is how complete it is. It's how many of the species that could live there are living there. And of course, if they're not living there, we've got a problem. And I've got to tell you, sadly, that in the UK, we live in one of the most nature-depleted parts of the world. I know it's hard to believe, isn't it? We love wildlife here. We sign up to all of our charities. We feed the birds. We take injured animals to wildlife hospitals. But ultimately, we've destroyed so much of our wildlife. Sounds like bad news, doesn't it? Sounds like it's a disaster. Well, it would be if we didn't have some solutions. Because whilst we've been counting and measuring the disappearance of all of that biodiversity, there have been plenty of people out there working really, really hard to fix the problem. The problem is that they haven't been able or allowed to do it broadly enough and rapidly enough. That's what we've got to change. But we can do it. And one of the places they've been doing it is at Knepp in Sussex, where the Knepp Wildland Foundation have been working to re-wild the environment. I mean, it's in the name, isn't it, really? Re-wild. Basically, what was farmland is now wildland. It hasn't taken them very long to do it. It's not something you can just do yourself. You can't just sort of close the farm gate and hope it's all going to sort itself out. It's a proactive process. They've done such an amazing job. They've got more butterflies of one species there than there are anywhere else in the country. And when they started, they had none. Lots of rare birds are now there, and they're common in that area. What they've proved, without any doubt, is that rewilding works when it comes to restoring biodiversity. Next up, saving wildcats. I can't tell you how exciting this is. I've been very, very fortunate to have visited the breeding sites where the captive wildcats have been bred, and they've subsequently been released back into the wild, and they're thriving. We know that because they've got little satellite transmitting devices on their backs, and the scientists have been able to follow them around. Honestly, I can't tell you how good it is, that project, saving wildcats. Oh, such a good animal, such good people, brilliant science, and now it's working. Next up, you're going to be hearing about Trees for Life. Oh, I can't tell you as well. Oh my God, this makes me really excited. Trees for Life are great. They hosted me and my friends last year when we did a little project called 8 out of 10 Bats, all about young people having opportunities to produce some of their own media. They were brilliant, absolutely brilliant hosts. But more important than that, Trees for Life. We need these trees. They keep our cities cool. They provide food for lots of wildlife. They lock up carbon, you know, and that saves us, you know, trying to lock it up ourselves, which is currently scientifically impossible. So look, Trees for Life are brilliant. They're planting loads of trees, nurturing those trees. But whilst we're on the plant side of things, let's not forget the National Wildflower Centre as well. We tend to, I'm afraid to say, concentrate on the animals sometimes, the fluffy stuff and the feathery stuff. But plants are brilliant. And without the wildflowers, you wouldn't have all of the insects supping on their nectar, and then you wouldn't have all the birds and mammals that eat those insects, would you? Comes back to that ecology, doesn't it? Ecology is the thing that we've really got to look after. And if we do that, we can have more of that biodiversity. So lastly, that's all other people doing things, and they're doing a brilliant job, and I'm sure you'll be excited by that. What can you do yourself? Well, believe it or not, this is my garden. Looks like a piece of woodland. Didn't look like a piece of woodland when I moved in though, did it? No, it was all cut. You know, people had been mowing the lawn. I don't have a lawnmower. I don't want a lawnmower. I don't want a lawn. I want my lawn to be ragged and full of wildflowers. So if you're lucky enough to have a garden, or maybe you've got a community green space or an allotment, then just let it go a little bit wild. Let it do its own thing. Do your own little rewilding project. It works. I've got loads more birds in my garden now. And if you're even luckier, you may have a school space where you can do a bit of rewilding as well, which would be truly fantastic. And you could do that and start that by digging up a piece of ropey old useless lawn. And yes, you can say this to your teachers and your head teacher, useless lawn, and planting some wildflowers. That would be a great start. Anyway, look, Have a great day at POP. I'm sorry I can't be with you. Very, very exciting. And remember, you can make a difference, and together we can really make that difference count.
Oh, Chris, what a fantastic scene setter for our session. I love the way he described what biodiversity is. And remember, it's that variety of life that we find in a given location. And it's so important that we maximise biodiversity to create fully functioning ecosystems. Now, I think Chris did a pretty good job of introducing the people and the projects that we're going to be finding out about today. And the first one that he mentioned is the work that's going on at the Knepp estate down in Sussex near the south coast of England. And that's where we're going to go first. We're going to go and meet Ryan Greaves and Laura Vaughan Hirsch from the Knepp Wildland Foundation. They're going to tell us about the work that they're doing. And I can't tell you, it is a transformational project, restoring biodiversity in a truly world-class, nature-led rewilding project. So let's go over to Knepp.
Welcome to the Knepp Estate in West Sussex, 3,500 acres of ex-arable farmland that's been turned into an amazing conservation experiment where nature is taking the driving seat. Knepp sits in a river valley beneath the downs. The soil here consists of 320 metres of low-wheeled clay, which in the winter months turns to this sloppy soup and in the summer bakes hard like concrete. This is why the land here wasn't as productive and profitable as the neighbouring farms on different soils, and this is why the owners here were making a loss year after year. In the year 2000, the owners decided to sell the dairy herd and farming equipment here to settle their debts. In the year 2001, they received stewardship funding to restore the middle block of the estate. And in 2002, they set upon their mission of a process-led, non-goal orientated project inspired by Franz Vera and the rewilding idea. Between 2001 and 2009, the southern block of the estate had been left unmanaged with no grazing animals and no perimeter fence. So it started to naturally regenerate from the plants and the trees living in the hedges. And then in 2009, the fencing was put in and our grazing animals were added. Here at Knepp, we have our very own Big Five grazing animals. They include the red deer, the Old English longhorn cattle, the Exmoor ponies, fallow deer, and our Tamworth pigs. These animals feed and move in different ways and initiate natural processes. This creates an amazing mosaic of different and ever-changing habitats. From open grassland, flourishing hedgerows, mature trees, deadwood, ponds, ditches and mixed scrubland. We've seen the return of some incredible species here at Knepp, including the nightingale, turtle dove, cuckoo, 13 species of bat, 60 species of invertebrate of notable conservation importance, including the purple emperor butterfly. One of the species we're most excited about bringing back to the UK is the white stork. And here's my colleague Laura to tell you a bit more.
Hi everyone, my name's Laura. I'm the White Stork Project Officer based here at Knepp, but working in collaboration with the Cotswold Wildlife Park, Roy Dennis Wildlife Foundation and other land owners across Sussex as well. My job is to look after the white stork population here and share information about the project. which started back in 2016 with the aim of re-establishing a wild, self-sustaining population of storks across the south of the UK. To start, we brought storks over from Warsaw Zoo in Poland via Cotswold Wildlife Park and here to Knepp. That took place back in 2016, and if you fast forward until 2020, amazingly, we had our first breeding storks in the UK in over 600 years. Back in 2020, we had 4 chicks fledge here at site. Fast forward to 2023, 26 wild chicks fledged, and this year, incredibly, we had 53 young storks fledged from the wild, mostly in oak trees like the one behind me. These white storks take part in some amazing migrations, and they can move all the way from us here in the UK to North Africa, specifically Morocco. They do this in their first year and then typically spend a year or so, or potentially more, investigating new areas, and then come back to the site where they were hatched at in order to breed. That usually takes 3 years, perhaps 4. Incredibly, for the first time this year in 2024, we had a stork that was hatched here at Knepp, photographed in France, then photographed in Morocco, come all the way back, and that young male has bred, producing 2 chicks of his own. So we've had a full circle moment in the project, and we're really excited about seeing more of that in the future.
Water is seen as quite a big focus for us here at Knepp. We've overseen a big river restoration, a pond creation project with the Newt partnership, and a beaver reintroduction. These incredible rodents play a vital role in so many ways. They help us hold back water with their dams, which helps alleviate flooding downstream. They also help to clean our water, and they create habitat for lots of aquatic species, things like fish, amphibians, even otters and water voles. And for that reason, they're known as a keystone species and an ecosystem engineer for the way that they can change our wetlands. Thanks to this radical approach, Knepp is now seen as a leading light in the conservation movement. Not only are we seeing amazing recovery in species and habitats, we're also helping offer solutions to some of our most pressing issues, things like soil restoration, flood mitigation, air and water purification, decline in insects, and carbon sequestration. And there's so much more excitement to come. Some amazing projects like our rewilded garden, our market garden, regenerative farm, and our ambitious Wheel to Waves corridor. We want young people like you to be part of this journey and part of this movement of nature recovery.
Wow. Thank you, Ryan and Laura, for putting together that amazing film. There was so much there. I can't believe Knepp's got its own big 5. And those storks, did you see the journey that those storks are now taking from Sussex? And that the success of that project is just outstanding. And if you want to ask Laura and Ryan any questions, they'll be joining us live for the Q&A towards the end of the session, so do keep your questions coming into the chat. And there's links to find out all about the work that's going on at Knepp there too. So where are we going to next? Well, the next project, we're coming back up to Scotland now, and we're heading north to the Cairngorms, where we're going to be joined by Helena Parsons. Hello, Helena, from the Saving Wildcats project. Now, Helena, you can introduce all this yourself, but I think you're going to be telling us about how the work that you're doing is bringing back these threatened, really amazing mammals from the brink of extinction. Over to you, Helena.
Hermione, that's right. So I'm Helena. I'm the Outreach and Engagement Manager for the Saving Wildcats project. And we aim to prevent the extinction of wildcats in Scotland by breeding them and releasing them into the wild. We've already established Britain's first large-scale conservation breeding centre for wildcats, and we're growing the population of wildcats in the Cairngorms National Park through releasing them. As well as that, we do a lot of work on continuing to remove the threats that wildcats face in the Highlands, to create other safe areas for wildcat releases. And a huge part of our work is also working with local communities to understand how best people can benefit from the presence of wildcats. So now I've got a very short film for you to watch, telling you a bit more about what we get up to day to day. Wildcats are Britain's last remaining wild felid. A separate species from your pet cat at home, wildcats are now on the brink of extinction in Scotland, hanging on by a claw in the Scottish Highlands. After centuries of habitat loss, persecution, hunting, and more recently, they've begun to hybridise or mix with domestic cats. Here in the Cairngorms National Park, the Saving Wildcats project aims to save wildcats by breeding them and releasing them into the wild. We began in 2020 and since then have successfully conducted the release of 28 wildcats into the Cairngorms Connect landscape. This year we were delighted to announce that 7 of the females released in 2023 had given birth to wild-born kittens. A dedicated conservation breeding for release centre has been built here in a quiet offshore area of Highland Wildlife Park. The centre consists of 16 enclosures that form 8 breeding enclosures where adult wildcats live and breed during the breeding season, giving birth to wildcat kittens. In these enclosures, the kittens spend their first couple of months of life with their mums, and when they reach their natural dispersal age, which is about 6 to 8 months old, they then move into pre-release enclosures. These larger enclosures incorporate the natural landscape and have been designed to allow the wildcats to develop all of the skills that they need to survive the challenges of life in the wild.
Here at the Saving Wildcats offices, our team of 16 people are based. We have our 5 field officers who track release wildcats across the Cairngorms National Park, as well as our 4 wildcat keepers who do everything for the wildcats, from cleaning their enclosures, providing them with food, and remotely observing their behaviour from a distance. Let's go take a look at how they do that.
So welcome to our CCTV room that we have here at the Saving Wildcats project. This room is absolutely integral to supporting our animal team in monitoring the welfare of all of our wildcats that we have. We've got 72 cameras that we can monitor here from the office, so it means that we can watch the cats live and not influence their behaviour in any way, which is absolutely vital in terms of supporting them to then go on and be released into the wild and live as wild cats. An example of a cat that would be considered to be released is a cat that's displaying lots of normal behaviours, so pouncing, running, climbing, interacting with conspecifics, grooming like this, all of the normal cat behaviours, and is also not seeking human attention and is staying away from the animal keepers when they go in there to feed. We create this, really robust profile of the cat's behaviour during its time with us. And it's deemed okay, then that cat is then suitable for release.
Every day our dedicated field team get ready to go out to track the wildcats that have been released. I'm going to go out with Alex today and see if we can track one of the released wildcats.
So I have one of the GPS collars. These are the collars that all the wildcats have when they've been released, and they have a battery which should hopefully last up to about 9 months, and then this is what we call the GPS housing. This is what records where the cat's movements are, and then we can look at that on a computer later. So when we're out in the field, a cat has one of these collars on, and then we use this equipment to try and find them. When we're out tracking, we'll wave this antenna around and we'll listen using the receiver, and we'll hear a ping, and then we'll get a little bit closer to the cat, and then eventually this space station will download all the cat's data.
I'm here with Alex, one of our field team members, and we're currently tracking a release wildcat. Can you explain to us a bit about some of the fun things about your job? So, is it always this easy, walking on a path?
It can sometimes, yeah. So sometimes we're walking along the path, sometimes we drive around the Cairngorms, sometimes we can be walking up hills as well. So every day brings something new, and it can also be in all different weathers as well. It can be nice and sunny, sometimes it can be pouring it down with rain, or like today, it can be a little bit blustery as well.
So we are in a beautiful landscape right now, and I'll just give you a quick shot of sort of everything behind me. So this is great wildcat habitat. They really like habitat edges. That's right, isn't it, Alex?
That's right. So all wildcats really need are areas where they can den, so that's where they can sleep and have kittens, and also areas where they can hunt, and edge habitat provides that.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, let's hope we can find a wildcat today.
Alex, what are we currently doing?
We're currently just driving around part of the release site. We've not been able to find them so far, so we're just driving around to the next high point so that we can have a nice vantage view.
We went to the vantage point, but unfortunately no luck. The field team have a huge area to cover.
Although we didn't find a wildcat today, Alex and the rest of the field team are always on the hunt for this elusive species. It's amazing to see them on camera, and we're so lucky to get so many of them on a network of camera traps that we have across the entire release site. Saving wildcats is all about restoring these phenomenal creatures into the landscapes that we share with them. A huge amount of our work also involves working with our local community. We want everyone who we live alongside to be just as excited as we are about the return of the wildcat to Scotland.
Oh, thank you so much, Helena. Do you want to just wrap up your film for us?
I will do. I was going to say, as you can see, our day-to-day can be quite all time consuming, and hunting for the wildcats across this sort of huge landscape that we call home is, it's a pleasure, but it can take quite a lot of time. And what I said in the short film about our local community being so important is absolutely integral to the success of our project. We wouldn't be where we are without our local community. And we also love sort of speaking to people about wildcats and getting them interested in what it is that we do. So if you'd like to help wildcat restoration and you live in Scotland, what's so important is responsible pet ownership. So speak to your parents, speak to your friends and family, and make sure that their pet cats are neutered and spayed, which will help the wildcat survive in Scotland in the long term. Thanks so much, Hermione.
Oh, thank you, Helena, and thanks for all those top tips at the end too, if you're lucky enough to live in wildcat country. Stay with us, won't you, because we'll come back to you for the live Q&A. But before all of that, we're going to stay in Scotland now and find out about another fantastic biodiversity project that's taking place not far from where Helena was. We're going to meet the people from Trees for Life at the Dundregan Rewilding Centre, not far from where this lovely image is taken. And Trees for Life are an organisation that are really leading rewilding efforts in the Scottish Highlands. So let's go now and meet James Rainey and Sarah Woodfin, and they're going to tell us all about their work on wild pines and red squirrels.
Hey everyone, here we are at the Dundregan Rewilding Centre. My name is James, I work as an ecologist at Trees for Life.
Hi, and I'm Sarah. I'm the Red Squirrel Project Manager at Trees for Life. We work for a charity that is working to restore nature across the Scottish Highlands, and we call this rewilding.
Today we're going to share some of the exciting projects we work on with you, from restoring ancient pine woods to reintroducing red squirrels. So we're going to go up to the woods now. So here we are in part of Scotland's Caledonian Forest. Woodlands like this once covered large parts of the Scottish Highlands, but today they're restricted to smaller pockets like the one we're in here. This is part of Trees for Life's Dundregan estate, and we're working to restore the woodlands here and expand them across the landscape to allow all of that wildlife to return. Caledonian forests are made up of trees like Scots pine here, which these trees can be hundreds of years old, and they're really part of the backbone of the ecosystem. A lot of the wildlife that lives in these places depends on these old Scots pines. We also have trees like birch, aspen, willow, rowan, and this added diversity means it can support even more wildlife. This forest used to cover massive areas of the Scottish Highlands, but today it's retreated into little fragments like the one we're in here. Now, although this place is now smaller than it used to be, it still supports loads of wildlife. Lots of different birds and animals, from pine marten and capercaillie down to tiny little wood ants. But as far as we know, these ancient pines, which once covered large parts of the Scottish Highlands, are now found in only 84 places. One of the projects we're doing at Trees for Life is called the Wild Pine Project, and we're looking for other places where wild pine might have survived. And we're finding them. So we're finding tiny sites where some of these ancient pine woods have retreated to that no one's known about before. And what we're trying to do is get them back on the map. And once we know where they are, we can protect them, we can restore them, and we can return the wildlife that's left there into the surrounding landscape. Whenever we talk about restoring our ancient pine woods in Scotland, what that often means is protecting the young trees from overgrazing. So a lot of our woodlands just have old trees left in them. All the young ones have been eaten repeatedly by grazing animals over the years, and so eventually the woodland just breaks down, the old trees die, and there's nothing left to replace them. Here at Dundragon, we've got some young Scots pines coming up to replace the old ones as they die, and that means the forest can continue into the future.
Red squirrels are one of Scotland's most iconic native species. They're an endangered species in the UK, but were once found throughout the British Isles. Now they are restricted to pockets such as the Isle of Wight, the north of England, bits of Wales, and mainly in the Scottish Highlands, where 75% of the British population remains. This is the national stronghold for red squirrels, so it is incredibly important to protect this central population. They are threatened through loss of habitat and also the invasive grey squirrel. This is a North American species and an invasive species that was introduced by the Victorians into areas of the central belt of Scotland and across England. Grey squirrels are such a significant threat to red squirrels because they not only compete with red squirrels for food, they breed faster than red squirrels and compete with them for space, but they also carry a disease which for them shows no symptoms. This is squirrel pox. It is highly infectious and can wipe out entire red squirrel populations within a matter of weeks. The Scottish Highlands does not have any grey squirrels present, which helps protect the red squirrel populations here. At Trees for Life, we are working to protect the red squirrels in the Highlands by restoring them to areas of the Highlands which have lost their squirrels due to historic forest loss. As the forest has recovered, the environment is now suitable for red squirrels to return, and as such, we are putting red squirrels back into these environments. Since 2016, we have moved 325 individual red squirrels from very healthy populations around Inverness and the Central Highlands to areas in the North and Western Highlands where red squirrels were once native and present but have historically been lost. All these populations are breeding and spreading and doing really well, so it's important to get as many sightings as possible of red squirrels throughout Scotland to allow us to protect and monitor this iconic native species.
So that's just a small part of the work we do here at Trees for Life. We see rewilding as nature-led and supported by people. It's about working with nature and natural processes to restore our ecosystems and rebuild our connections with the land.
Rewilding requires us to be bold. We must all be heading in the same direction to leave the land in a better state than which we found it. If you have any questions, we'll be answering them very soon.
Oh, thank you, James and Sarah. What another really inspiring, positive story. And those red squirrels, wow, you've got to be quick to film them. They were so keen to get out of their boxes and into their new areas. And remember, you can ask any questions that you've got for James and Sarah in the chat, and they're going to be joining us soon. So now, if you've been wondering a bit about what you can do, I mean, certainly there's lots of people involved in all these projects, and that could be a future job for you. But what about right now? What can we all do to help? Well, I think we're all going to find some inspiration in our next film. And we are going to the National Wildflower Centre, which is based at the Eden Project in Cornwall. And there we're about to join Robbie Kirkman and Steph Knights, and they're going to tell us all about it, and importantly, what we can do to help as well. So let's go over to Robbie and Steph at National Wildflower Centre.
Welcome to Eden Project in Cornwall. Our mission here at Eden Project is to demonstrate and inspire positive action for the planet. Now, you might know Eden Project because of its iconic biomes, which showcase biodiversity from across the globe. But Eden Project is also the home of the National Wildflower Centre, which is based at our Growing Point plant nursery located on the hill just behind me. The National Wildflower Centre is all about protecting and restoring biodiversity in the UK. Let's head up there and find out more. So this is Eden's Growing Point plant nursery. It's absolutely massive, with the capacity to produce over 1 million plants per year. Inside the plant nursery, we grow plants for our biomes, plants to sell in the shop, as well as plants to make food for our cafes. And as if that wasn't enough, it's also the home of the National Wildflower Centre. We're going to head inside and find Steph Knights. Steph is the National Wildflower Centre project manager, and she can explain more. So here we are inside Growing Point Plant Nursery, and I've found Steph. Steph, could you tell us a little bit about the purpose of the National Wildflower Centre, please?
Yeah, sure. Hi, Robbie. So at the National Wildflower Centre, we create and restore wildflower meadows. We do that in the countryside. We also create areas of wildflowers in cities and towns and villages and schools for people to enjoy. But ultimately, what we're doing is creating habitat for wildlife and pollinators.
Excellent, thank you. And I imagine all those bees and insects are pollinating lots of our crops.
Absolutely. So that's why having more space for nature and more wildflowers it is really important, because then pollinators will have more resources available to them to then be able to pollinate our crops.
Excellent. Can you tell us a bit more then about that process of how we get from harvesting seeds to actually processing them and then packaging them and sending them off again?
Yeah, so actually to create meadows and to create these spaces for nature with wildflowers, we need seed. So in order to do that, we brush harvest the seed from the fields.
Yeah.
We bring the seed back here and we lay it out here to dry. Obviously in the field, as soon as we take it off the field, we lay it out in the field to make sure all the insects escape before we bring it back here. But here we actually lay it out to dry and we rake it on a daily basis, and it's really simple. We just turn it over like this.
Yeah.
And what that does, it helps the seed dry out.
Okay, so after this step's done, what's next?
So it gets bagged up, and we've got some here already bagged up. This is actually cornflower.
Wow.
Yeah, so obviously we don't want all the heads and all the stalks in, and that's what we call chaff.
Yeah.
So we just want the actual seed. So the first step is to sieve it and get the big stuff out, and that's what we do with this.
Okay.
So in here, we've got the next stage, which is a lot cleaner than it was, as you can see.
Absolutely, yeah.
And there's these little paintbrush looking seeds.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. After that stage, they go into our big seed cleaning machines. That's the next stage. So, and then what you get at the end is really just the pure seed. And then you can use that to make all sorts of mixes to create these great habitats that we make.
So clearly the National Wildflower Centre is making a massive contribution to restoring biodiversity in the UK. But how can we get involved at home or at school, and do you have any top tips for us?
So there's lots you can do. It doesn't have to be a big area, because what you'll find is if you grow any wildflowers, the bees will find them, the butterflies will find them. So if you plant them, they will come. So it doesn't have to be, you don't have to spend a lot of money, and you don't have to have a lot of space.
Excellent, thanks Steph. So it sounds like there's loads of ways people can get involved, and I love the way you said, if you plant them, they will come. Okay folks, well that just about wraps things up from the National Wildflower Centre here at Eden Project. There are just so many upsides to planting your own wildflowers. It's easy to do, and it connects you back into nature. It's also inexpensive, and you don't need a lot of space. Creating wildflower habitats gives us a way to take positive action for the environment, and of course, they make a real difference to biodiversity and pollinating insects where you live. Be sure to check out the links to begin your wildflower planting journey where you live. And finally, remember, when it comes to protecting and restoring nature, we can all do something, and what we do matters. So get involved.
Oh, thank you so much, Robbie and Steph. Absolutely, what we all do really matters, and yet in the links you're going to find information if you've been inspired to perhaps start your own wildflower project. Now, we're going to be joined by all our contributors in a moment for our live Q&A. And thank you for putting your questions into the chat. I'm going to be putting them to our contributors just about in a few seconds. If you keep the questions coming, though, because we've got about 10 minutes. I know we're supposed to finish this session in 3 minutes, but I think we'll overrun by a few minutes just to make sure that we can ask you all some questions. So hello, everybody. We can all see you now on our screens. Thanks so much. Lots of questions coming in, but the first one, I'm going to come to you, Ryan, and Laura at Knepp. Ryan, tell us about this Wheeled to Waves project, because you mentioned that at the end of your film. It sounds amazing. Is Knepp expanding?
Yeah, we're kind of trying to take the lessons learned from Knepp and then extend them across a much bigger area of Sussex so we can support biodiversity and nature recovery across a much bigger scale. So at the minute, it's over 150 miles of land pledged to this corridor, and yeah, from sort of small gardens and green spaces up to big landowners and down the rivers and up. Sort of it spreads from the northeast of Sussex, the Ashdown Forest, some amazing wheeled woodland, down to the kelp restoration project down in southwest Sussex. So yeah, a really exciting idea, and we want everyone to kind of join and help us promote nature recovery.
Yeah, definitely, and ways for people that live in that region to get involved by the sounds of things. Now, there is a question that's come in on the chat, thank you very much, about storks. That footage of the storks was just amazing, and that success that you've had in just a few years. The question that we've got coming in is whether storks have the same partners for life. How does that work?
That's a really great question. So in the literature, you'll read that they do indeed stick with a partner for life. And that's slightly different to what we've actually observed here at Knepp. So typically, a stork in the wild can live 20 years or more, and they complete these amazing migrations. They migrate separate from their partners and then come back to their nest, but they don't always stick with their same partner. So they seem to be a little bit more loyal to the nest itself rather than their actual partner. So most of the time they'll stick together for as long as they can, but we have seen some swapping going on, which has been quite interesting for us to observe.
Yeah, that's incredible. Really getting an insight into behaviours now. And after 600 years, they're back. That is just fantastic. Now, Helena, we've got lots of questions coming in about wildcats, as you might imagine. Those kittens, just fantastic footage from the wild. It's great that you've got that technology. The questions I've got here, perhaps we'll put a couple together. How can you tell the difference between a wildcat and a domestic cat? Because at a distance, you might think, oh, they look a bit similar to a tabby cat. So how can you be sure they're a wildcat? And secondly, just a reminder of how many are now out in the wild.
Yeah, those are both great questions. So it can be really difficult to tell apart a wildcat from a domestic cat. They are two separate species, but yeah, they look really similar. So we use a sort of process called pelage scoring, where we look at the markings of the cat. And there are several indicative markings that we look for, such as a really blunt, bushy tail with distinct stripes. Domestic cats are more likely to have a line that runs all the way down the tail, whereas wildcats don't. And we also look at more stripes on the flanks, so on the body of the wildcat, as opposed to maybe more spots on a pet domestic cat. But yeah, it can be really difficult. In terms of how many we've released, so we've actually released 28 individuals, and 7 of the released females have now had kittens. I can't give you an exact number on kittens because they're really difficult to monitor. They're really small, so we can't fit them with collars, and sometimes we see them on cameras and sometimes we don't. And we can go weeks without seeing a kitten, and then surprise, suddenly it's there after weeks of looking. But yeah, at least 28 wildcats out there, which is super exciting.
Wow, yeah, and that's actually picking up on a point that has come in about the collars. You know, are there risks with those collars?
That's a question we get asked a lot, and the collars are made of a really, really soft silicone material, and they're less than about 3% of the wildcat's body weight. So it's really, really light for them and doesn't affect their behaviour. And in the first year, we actually fitted the wildcats with the collars prior to their release so that we could monitor their behaviour in our enclosures first to see if the collars had any negative effects. And what we found is that the wildcats just pretty much deal with having the collars. They barely notice them. Yeah, we haven't really seen any issues with those, which is great.
Okay, well, that's really reassuring. Now, I really want to ask some questions about wild pines and red squirrels. Thank you, James and Sarah, for your lovely film and, you know, showing off this wonderful background that I've got here at the Dundragon Estate. When you're releasing the red squirrels, there's a question coming here about the habitats and the trees that the red squirrels like. How do you know that the habitat or the area is ready to put the red squirrels into?
Okay. So we have a minimum requirement that we need 180 hectares of what we term good red squirrel habitats. So this is ideally a mix of mature deciduous trees like oak and beech and chestnut, as well as things like Scots pine or other pine trees or other sort of conifer trees, and smaller trees such as like hazel or rowan. So that really this produces an area of forest that's got both areas that a squirrel can form a dray or a nest in, but also provide food throughout the year for it.
Okay. That's great, thank you. That gives us a really good idea of where those squirrels can then expand and thrive. And James, while we've got you, you were showing us little, are they saplings of wild pines? How do you protect them? How do you stop them being grazed and eaten so that they can then grow up and start rewilding the area successfully?
So there used to be lots of livestock in the Scottish Highlands in the past, but that's not the case so much anymore. And mainly the main large herbivores that feed on the trees today are mainly deer. And we're meant to have deer in our landscape. They're a really important part of our nature and biodiversity. But in the Scottish Highlands, deer don't have any predators anymore. So we've removed the wolves, the lynx, and the bear as well, which used to feed on deer. So in their absence, we're really responsible for managing the deer population and for keeping it at a level where people can benefit from the venison that you can get from wild deer, but also a level where the young trees are able to grow up without being completely eaten by the population. So it's a tricky kind of balancing act, but yeah, it's about managing deer. We can do that in some cases through fencing, but it tends to be better to manage the population as a whole. That's where we see the best kind of recovery of nature more widely. And we are also looking at reintroducing some of the lost species, which might help to control deer numbers. There's a project looking at lynx and how they might be able to come back to Scotland someday. So yeah, there's all kinds of things being considered.
Yeah, well, lynx, that would be amazing. We'll definitely get that back on POP. Now, we've only got a minute or so left, so I'm very keen, Robbie and Steph, to find out a little bit more about the National Wildflower Centre. Thanks so much for your really inspirational film. There's a question coming on the chat here, sort of thinking historically, why have we lost so much wildflower habitat, you know, in the last 50, 100 years? Where's it all gone?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So through a variety of things, unfortunately, and since World War II, with the ramping up agriculture and intensive agricultural production, taking out hedgerows and expanding to very large fields and turning meadows into productive fields for farming has had a huge impact on our species-rich grasslands and wildflower meadows. Also development, you know, we've expanded as a human race, expanding our range rapidly and where we live. So we've reduced them in that regard as well. So sort of fragmented the habitat as well into very small pockets. So it's about trying to reconnect those areas of land and looking at where land is less productive for farming, that we can then leave it to we can enhance it for species-rich grassland or wildflower meadows and connect these habitats up. So unfortunately it's a result of you know, the way that we live really, and the way that we sort of progressed in society. So and the need to grow more, but also in a way that is not really sustainable.
Okay, Thanks so much, Steph. So, final question, I think. I'm sorry we haven't got much time to get through all your questions, but Robbie, I just want to ask you, there's one here. Where is the best place for a wildflower meadow? Or if we're going to start growing flowers ourselves, where's the best place to do that?
I'd say the best place for a wildflower meadow is probably any space that you've got. So whether that be a small space at home or a little piece of land in school that's not being used, or a piece of lawn, like Chris was saying. But any space that you've got, you don't need a lot of space. It's simple to do and it's fun to do together. So yeah, it's a really great activity to get involved with.
Well, great. Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks to all our contributors for joining us. I'm sorry, that's all we've got time for today on protecting biodiversity. Thanks very much to you, the audience, for joining us for this session, for all your questions. Thanks, of course, to Chris Packham for his fabulous introduction, and to all the people behind the scenes who are making POP24 happen today. If you can stay with us for the rest of the day, we've got lots of sessions coming up. There's some careers-focused sessions all about how people have gone into jobs that are protecting the planet with science, technology, engineering and maths. We've also got STEM Clubs Hour coming up at the end of the school day, and that is with two of my colleagues from here at Dynamic Earth, Chris and Ali. They've got an action-packed hour full of activities and focusing really on satellites and space and how that helps us to protect our planet. So check out the website for the rest of the sessions, and I hope you can stay tuned to Protecting Our Planet Day 2024. I've absolutely thoroughly enjoyed all the contributions we've had from our fabulous teams online with us here. Give us a wave, everybody. That's all we've got time for. Goodbye. Hello and welcome to Protecting with Engineering. My name's Hermione Cockburn. I am your host for this session, which is part of Protecting Our Planet Day 2024, or POP24 as we like to call it. And all day the POP team have been streaming the most incredible sessions from POP Mission HQ here at Dynamic Earth Science Centre in Edinburgh. Now this session, which is all about following a career in engineering. It might be the one you're tuning in specifically for, or you might have been with us for hours already. But either way, stay with us now, and I'm going to introduce you to three very different types of engineer. Now, all of them, I would say, are relatively near the start of their careers, but already the work that they are doing is having such an impact, providing insights, breakthroughs, practical solutions to what we need to do to protect our planet for the future. They're going to be explaining about what's inspired them, how they got from school, where you might be, into their jobs that they're doing now. And after we've heard from them, it's going to be over to you. We're going to leave time at the end for some questions. So if you've got questions for any of our panelists, be sure to pop them in the chat, and we will make sure that we get to them before the end of the session. The session is being recorded, so you can come back and re-watch this. It'll be up on the STEM Learning YouTube channel sometime before the end of the year, before Christmas. And if you're going to be posting anything on social media about your engagement with POP, make sure you tag us POP24. Now, just before we get to meet our engineers, I've got a little bit of a confession. I am not an engineer. I work in public engagement with science, which means that I work alongside scientists and experts, helping them explain and communicate the work that they're doing so that people of all backgrounds and all ages can appreciate the value of science and the relevance of science to them in their daily lives. Now, engineering, as I understand it, is all about applying science and making sure we're putting good science into the practical and technological solutions that we need to ensure that we live on our planet more efficiently or just better, really. That's what engineering is all about. In terms of a career destination, it's a really broad destination. So without further ado, we're going to meet the first engineer that we've got lined up for you. And I'm really pleased to introduce Sehar. Sehar Raza is a graduate engineer. She's working in offshore transmission in the Energy Networks Department with WSP in the UK. So Sehar, I think we can come to you now and you can tell us all about the work that you do. Hi there.
Right, thanks for introducing me. So I'm Sehar. I'm an engineer working to reduce carbon emissions in the electricity grid system, which is used to bring electricity to you in your homes. I'll explain what I do in a bit more detail, but first I'm going to take you through the key experiences in school and university that led me to this job. So at school, I found it really hard to picture a specific future career, but what I did know was I wanted to make a difference and be in a career that I could be really proud of. I also knew that I wanted to actually enjoy what I'm doing. And when I got to my last years of school, I found myself really enjoying maths and physics. I didn't at the start, but I more was into the more artsy projects near the beginning, but just my last years of school, I just found that's what I was most interested in. It wasn't until I learned about engineering where I could imagine a career that met both my passions and interests. I was introduced to engineering in my last 2 years of school, so quite late on, through talks like this one and through engineering programmes. I attended Scottish-based school the summer before I started applying to uni, and this was a great experience where I got to live at university for a week, take part in activities from different engineering departments, talk to students about why they were studying engineering, and hear all about exciting careers engineers could go into from people working at NASA. But picking one type of engineering to study was a really tough decision as they all looked interesting and could lead to exciting careers. That's why I picked electrical and mechanical engineering, where I took all sorts of classes learning about renewable energy, robotics, spaceflight systems, nuclear power. And I got to learn about all these for different methods like lectures, practical labs, programming labs, and computers. By studying EME, I could picture a number of exciting career paths, a number of very exciting but different career paths. But joining the Engineers Without Borders Society at uni reminded me of why I picked engineering in the first place. And that taught me about the role engineers can play in solving global challenges like tackling climate change, ensuring everyone has access to clean energy, and achieving a sustainable future. This influenced the classes I took in my last 2 years of uni, learning about how clean energy is produced and delivered to our homes. And it also helped me to decide what to do for my final year project, where I really enjoyed creating a game board that taught people of all ages and backgrounds about renewable energy systems within different communities. At the end of uni, I also volunteered at COP26, or Conference of the Parties, which is where world leaders come together to plan on how we can reduce greenhouse gas emissions in each country to fight climate change. This is where I learned about the difference engineers can make to help save and protect our planet, and this inspired me to apply for the job I have now. So I work as an engineer in interconnector projects. Interconnectors are basically large undersea power cables that connect countries, allowing electricity from renewable sources to be shared across the world. The UK currently has 9 interconnectors, so we can share electricity between Ireland, France, Belgium, the Netherlands, Denmark, and Norway, but the number of interconnector projects in planning and that are being built just keeps growing. I mean, WSP right now is involved in an interconnector project connecting the UK all the way to Morocco. Interconnectors are really useful in the fact that they help the UK to receive electricity from other countries at times of high electricity demands, so after school or work when everyone is back home, and also deliver electricity to another country when too much is being produced, so on windy days when we make too much electricity from wind turbines. Interconnectors help bring renewable energy from where it's being made, so from offshore wind farms far out into the sea, back to our homes. Renewable systems are based on weather conditions though, so they can be quite intermittent, but interconnectors can help ensure that we have electricity at all times by quickly sending large amounts of electricity to where it is needed. So since starting at WSP just over a year ago, I've worked in the Greenlink Interconnector project, which connects Ireland and Wales. Basically through a large power cable which is being laid in the picture shown in picture 2. This project is capable of powering like over 380,000 homes with clean energy, so it's really important in reducing carbon emissions and helping to tackle climate change. My team has worked on this project for over 6 years, and as a team, we tend to get involved in projects throughout all stages. So from like the initial planning stages right through to testing and commissioning, which means that we get to meet and work with lots of different people, which is really exciting. And we also get to work like in our offices, but also on site. So I got to spend 3 weeks in Wales on our construction site, shown in the picture at the top. And I also got to spend 2 weeks training and witnessing tests in Germany. I guess the final point for me is, like, yes, I'm really lucky to have finally found the perfect role for me, but I didn't figure this out until I was 24. And I think the key thing to figuring out what you want to do is to say yes to all the learning experiences and opportunities you can to find out what you're really interested and passionate about. That's me. Thank you for listening.
That's fabulous. Thank you so much. I could really get a sense of enjoyment about your job coming across there, Sahar. And I think that's so important, isn't it? To work on things that you enjoy. And as Sahar says, you might not work it out until you're 24. Now, I think we're going to move on to our next panellist now, who is Ross Sanders. And Ross is a marine robotics technologist working at Plymouth Marine Laboratory. So, Ross, let's come to you now and let's hear about how your career has shaped up.
Hello, thank you very much for the introduction. So, my name's Ross Sanders, and this is how I became a marine robotics technologist at Plymouth Marine Laboratory, or the alternative title, if my slideshow works. Here we go. How I went from being on growing up on a small farm in Cornwall to driving an ROV around a data buoy in the English Channel. So in terms of education, I've always been in engineering. I actually did a GCSE in electronics, which I was very fortunate to do at Liscard School and Comprehensive. And then when I was doing A-levels, I chose very kind of STEM subjects. So electronics, again, I was fortunate enough to do at Truro. I did physics, chemistry and mathematics. I enjoyed all of them. I actually really enjoyed chemistry and could have been a chemical engineer if life had turned out differently. Then went on to do a degree at the University of West of England in electronic and electrical engineering. And I did a year in industry. So between my second and third years, I went off to work for a company called Renishaw that make industrial measurement equipment as an electronic engineer. And that was incredibly useful to kind of work in a real environment with real deadlines, real equipment. That was so useful. So if you're looking at engineering courses, please consider a year in industry. My first job coming out of university was with the British Antarctic Survey. I was a wintering electronics engineer at Halley Research Station. So I was there for 18 months. So an Antarctic summer season where the sun doesn't set and it gets down to about -20. We were able to go and see the emperor penguins. We were near the world's largest emperor penguin colony. Do lots of field work, so going out on skidoos to measure how ice shelves are moving. And we were monitoring lots of different scientific aspects, from space weather through to the atmosphere down to the ice itself. I then did an Antarctic winter, which is where the sun sets for 3 months of the year. And it got down to -50, and we saw the Aurora Australis, absolutely beautiful sight. And we were the only people around for about 500 kilometers. So the nearest people to us were on the International Space Station. It would have been Tim Cook at the time. I then went on to work for the British Antarctic Survey full-time as an electronics engineer. So this was based at the headquarters in Cambridge, where I did a lot of work automating instruments. The picture of me there with the orange overalls, that's a Dobson photospectrometer, which is the instrument that was used to find the hole in the ozone layer. So normally it's a very manual instrument that a technician has to operate. I automated it so it could work during periods where the station was unstaffed. I've also been able to do a lot of field work from aircraft and indeed walking out into the field, and also a lot of work on the British Antarctic Survey's vessels, such as the Sir David Attenborough, who I think we got to speak to earlier, and also the JCR. So this was a lot of oceanographic work, studying how the oceans are changing, and also a lot of atmospheric work, looking at greenhouse gases and how their effects on the climate are affecting everybody. I then went on to have a brief stint in the commercial offshore geotechnical equipment sector as a principal electronics engineer. I designed some systems for installing offshore wind turbines. This was a really large drill, which had an 8.5 meter diameter drill bit, absolutely ginormous. I designed the control system for that. Some launch recovery systems for lowering equipment into the sea. These were to move away from hydraulics over water, so using electrification to provide for kind of greener solutions in a greener world, and some coring systems, again, for the offshore wind turbines, so that geologists can know what the sediment layers are like, so they can draw the correct foundations for offshore wind turbines. It's all really exciting. I'm applying all the stuff from university and even all the way back to GCSE in my day-to-day life. And I now work at Plymouth Marine Laboratory as a marine robotics technologist. So I'm responsible for providing automated solutions for marine science. So these can be our water sampling rosettes. You can see me there smiling away on the back of our boats, the PML Quest, through to our data buoys, which we have in the English Channel south of Plymouth. These are collecting lots of data. We have a profiling CTD, so it's telling us all about the water column as part of our long-term data set, which goes back to 1988. Through to autonomous surface vehicles such as the Autonaut that you can see on the bottom left, which is a fully autonomous surface vehicle that we can send out on missions for up to 90 days at a time. And I get to play with all these toys, and it's great fun. So thank you, that's me.
Oh, thank you, Ross. Again, just like that fun element coming over in your job. Can I just ask you, Ross, a quick question before we move on? How did you get that first job in Antarctica? Because I imagine they're very sought after.
That's an excellent question. So they are certainly sought after. I think a few hundred people applied for my role when I first got it. I was actually into climbing a lot at the time. And I think I was in my final year at university. We'd just come back from a climbing trip in Italy, and I was looking for a climbing magazine, and there was a full-page advert for a field guide in Antarctica. And they had an amazing photo of like somebody doing ice climbing. It looked really cool. I went onto the British Antarctic Survey website to just see what the role involved. I was not qualified at all for it, but they had a role for an electronics engineer. I was in my final year at university and thought, I'm very nearly a qualified engineer. I'll apply. And managed to get the job. So I think all my other experience doing climbing and lots of outdoor things, working on a farm and being very resilient, definitely helped me. And I got the job of a lifetime.
Oh, fabulous. That's a great story. Well, sit tight because we'll come back to you with lots more questions in a moment. But before we do, I'm going to introduce our final panellist, and that is Ben Winchester. And Ben is a postgraduate researcher. He's in the Department of Chemical Engineering and at the Grantham Institute at Imperial College London. Hello, Ben. Tell us about your career.
Hi there. Yeah, my name's Ben, postgraduate researcher, which I sort of think is code for PhD student. So I'm in the final year of my PhD in chemical engineering, and I'll get on to sort of what I do now and how I got there. So at school, I studied quite similar to everyone else, sort of very science-focused A-levels, maths, chemistry, and physics. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do afterwards. Unlike everyone else, I feel I came very late to the engineering party. So I went off to university and studied physics, which I just sort of chose based on what I was most interested in at the time. And it was a really great degree, really great fun. I enjoyed lots of the sort of practical aspects, less practical than engineering, but it contained maybe more of the sort of theoretical stuff that I quite liked at the time. So more sort of the maths and sort of quantum mechanics and particle physics, which I found really interesting. And I got to the end of my 4 years and again, didn't really know what I was going to do next. I hadn't really got anything planned or anything lined up. And so I did sort of what a lot of people might do, which is sort of a gap year. I took some time out to travel and set off on a sort of journey around the world by train. Started in the UK, headed around sort of up through Russia, which was all really, really great fun. Saw lots of amazing sights, lots of great people. everywhere we went on this trip was what really sort of struck me about it was the amount of air pollution and sort of smog and smoke. And Russia was really great, but being so close to the sea, there was a lot of pollution that was car fumes mixing with sea air. And it was really quite smoggy and difficult to breathe. It was a similar story as I sort of traveled around further east towards China. Again, it was all really beautiful, really stunning. But the pictures aren't quite like what you find on Google. A lot of sort of air pollution and a lot of dust. And similar to Kathmandu, which was a really amazing place to visit. But again, there was so much pollution that you couldn't see the sort of mountains that were maybe only 3 or 4 miles away because the air was so thick with smog. So it sort of really inspired me to do something climate related. I didn't really know what it was going to be, but I wanted to do something where the work I did on the day-to-day, in some small way, had an impact on how we treat the planet. I've tried to find opportunities in environmental work, and sort of nothing really happened. So I took a turn into engineering, maybe not through an engineering degree, but via the sort of back door, I like to think, through software engineering. So I worked for a year and a half on for a company called Cisco, which they work on these large, big computers that we don't really see, but they sit between whenever you use a mobile phone or computer or anything to access a website. It goes maybe from your phone to your phone carrier 3 or EE or someone. And then through these really big computers that they built that sit in warehouses somewhere before it reaches the website and eventually Spotify or whatever video of a cat we're trying to watch at the time. And it was really great fun, and it took the stuff I'd learned at university and a lot of the theoretical bits around science that were part of my physics degree and applied it to real things. Software maybe isn't real, but the computers were real. So I like to think there was some practical aspect to what was going on. Ultimately, though, I felt I still wanted to do something climate related, something to do with the planet. And so I was looking around for opportunities to get back into environmental research or to start something more eco-friendly. And so I then applied and got a PhD at Imperial College London. In chemical engineering is the department I'm in, but it's I like to think of it as energy systems engineering. And a lot of the questions that I try and answer, the things I do now, look at solar panels, which we see a lot of in the UK on people's roofs, and we see a lot in fields. And that's really great, and it's really important because we have to reduce our impact on the environment and reduce our carbon footprint. But when we look at maps around the world of where people don't have access to power and where people don't have access to drinking water, and there are lots of other challenges, agriculture and education and healthcare, a lot of the maps all look quite similar in terms of the places in the world that do have access to power and the places that don't have access to power. And so a lot of the work I do looks at solar panels and whether we can use them to try and answer questions and help people in these, this is sort of sub-Saharan Africa, pictured here, Africa that's sort of south of the Sahara. And a lot of the research I do is how we can best apply these solar panels to meet some of the challenges around drinking water and around energy. So in my final year, and I have done some practical engineering, at least. A lot of what I do is theoretical. But these are the solar panels that I've installed on my narrowboat that I live on, which is it's a small impact, but it was still a fun sort of system to get my hands on. And as so much of what I do is theory, it's nice to sort of see some practical things being built, get my hands sort of dirty that way. Yeah, that's sort of my journey then.
Oh, thank you so much. I love the fact that that's your work kind of crossing over to your very cool looking houseboat. Ben, I just want to go back to that motivation that you had to move from what was probably a very well-paid job in industry and then to go back into research and academia and go for your PhD. Talk us through that moment in your career.
Yeah, it definitely was a significant pay cut and a sort of transition for something that was a very stable job where there's a nice career progression as you go through to something where it's a lot more unpredictable and year by year you don't know what's going to be coming up next. So it definitely was a sort of leap into the unknown, and it sort of still is a leap, a journey in the unknown. But I felt that the climate emergency and sort of climate change and our impact on the planet is so pressing that I felt that it was worth taking the risk. It was worth going into something. And I was just looking around sort of everywhere that had PhD opportunities in research. And it was sort of just by chance, really, that I found this one. But I'm really glad I did it.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Well, now we've got our three panellists back with us. And remember, now is your opportunity. We've got 8 minutes. Put your questions into the chat and I will pass them on. We've actually got one question already come in from Sutton Grammar School. And this is to you, Ross. And the question is, what was the most challenging part of your trip or your work in Antarctica? And that's from a Year 7 student. So yeah, what was challenging about your time right down south on the ice?
Oh, that's a really good question. The most challenging part was definitely being so far away from my friends and family. So particularly during my winter, that was a year and a half away, about 12,000 miles away from everybody back at home in a completely different, isolated environment. So I obviously missed like everybody's birthday. I know for certainly my mum's birthday, we were launching weather balloons every day. So I wrote on it, "Happy birthday, mum," and sent her a nice photo of launching this weather balloon. But yeah, being a long way from everybody I loved.
Yeah, well, I chose a background here. This is a ship down in Antarctica. How was it being on ships? Because you spent some time working on board research vessels, is that right?
That's right. So I spent, I've been on about, I think 7 cruises in Antarctica. So on the British Antarctic Survey's old vessel, the James Clark Ross, and the newer one, the Sir David Attenborough. Both were very nice, and life on board a ship is quite monotonous. So you end up doing the same things every day. We'd get up, have breakfast, do lots of science. Whenever equipment broke down, I'd have to go and repair it. That was my role. I'd have meals at the same time, usually sit with the same people. And it was absolutely amazing. So we'd go through, say, Drake's Passage, where we had huge waves, like 20-meter waves. The ship would be bucking all over the place. You're sliding around, trying to sit at a desk, and you disappear to the other side of the room and come back again. And then when you get into the ice, it suddenly goes really calm, and it's just pristine white outside. And so you go outside to enjoy it, and it's freezing cold, as you would imagine.
Yeah,
yeah. So you go from wearing, say, a t-shirt or something inside, like the people on the SDA were earlier, you stand outside and it's suddenly minus 20 and freezing. And you can see penguins and seals, and if you're very lucky, whales coming out of the water. There's nothing like it. It's an amazing experience.
Right.
I can't recommend working in these kind of places enough.
Well, it's where engineering can take you. That's amazing. Sahar, I want to come to you next because your career seems so logical in the steps that you've taken, and now you're working on interconnectors. And it's not something that perhaps many people know that much about, but it just sounds so central to the way the world works, really, and how we need to kind of develop our energy systems. Why did you go into interconnectors? That's what I'm sort of quite intrigued about. It seems quite a specific niche area. What led you there?
Well, I guess after COP26, I knew that I wanted to work in the energy sector, work to reduce carbon emissions and work to help tackle climate change. But at university, my subjects were mainly based on renewable energy. I didn't really learn about interconnectors until my last year, and it was one lecture in one of my classes. And I was just really interested. I was really interested in learning about a new technology, a new way to bring energy to our homes. And I just wanted to learn more. And the more I think I learn about interconnectors and how it's really just a growing industry, like the number of interconnectors that are currently going into planning and development is huge.
Yeah.
I think I was just excited to be in this kind of like new emerging industry.
Yeah.
But even then, I applied to WSP because it's a massive energy company, and I applied to a department and got put into this team with the idea knowing that I could move if I wanted to. I could move to a different energy team. I could explore different projects. But I ended up really liking the team I got put into. and I think I'll probably stay here for a while anyways.
Great. Well, there you go. Go to your lessons, go to your lectures, because you never know. There could be one that just like really inspires you for your career. So that's a great story. We've got some more questions coming in on the chat now. So here we go. Ben, one for you. What are your further plans for your research career? Yeah, what's happening in the future, do you think, for you?
Yeah, ideally, I've got a plan for next year, and other than that, the plan is to sort of keep going as I go. So next year, I'll still be looking at renewable energy and solar panels, and I'm going to sort of start shifting into this question of farming and solar and whether we can combine the two. In the UK, we have not a lot of land, and there's often a sort of competition, or at least people think there's a competition between whether we have solar panels on some land or whether we have a farm for agriculture. And governments are sort of variously including and excluding places you can and can't put solar panels. And so the plan is to go into research around what if we can combine these two things together, and maybe we can put solar panels on top and have some sheep grazing underneath, or maybe we have solar panels that are sort of in long lines and then you can still drive a combine harvester in between. Or maybe we're doing something really fancy like solar panels that go on top of a greenhouse and they let some of the light through to the strawberry plants underneath, and then some of the light gets taken away to power the water pumping, or maybe the sort of machinery that's being used to milk cows or chill the milk down.
Yeah, real exciting innovation really on the horizon, I think, by the sounds of things. Now, we've got a really interesting question come in now. And I think, you know, you three are just sort of like amazing sort of standout adverts for what you can do with engineering and your enjoyment and your success in your career. But do you think the pathways that you've kind of highlighted are accessible to young people who don't really know what they're doing, perhaps struggling a bit in school? Do you have colleagues who have taken other routes into engineering? I don't know who wants to pick up that first, but it's about, yeah, if you don't really know what you're doing and you're not you're not doing your science A-levels, do you think you can, is this still a pathway that's accessible to you? Who wants to go? Ross, what about you? Do you encounter people who've taken different routes into engineering?
Yeah, so I actually work with a couple of people that have taken different routes to engineering. One of my colleagues, who is now a robotics engineer, has just completed a university degree after being an electrician's apprentice.
Right, okay.
So he was going to be a Sparky and then found it wasn't for him, went off to university, did his degree, and now he's a marine robotics technologist just like me.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah, so you can take different pathways and still end up working in these fields. Now, we've only got a minute or so left of our session time before we're going over to look at careers that you can do with maths. So in our final minute, panellists, if I could just come to you all and just give a bit of advice to the young people who are watching, you know, try and encapsulate any advice that you wish you had had, perhaps when you were back in secondary school. Who wants to go first? Sahar, do you want to?
Yeah, of course. I guess I would say, like, it's completely okay if you don't know what you want to do. I mean, even when I applied to my job, I was still like, oh, I don't know. Is this the right company? Is this the right place? But kind of, I guess the only way that you're going to figure it out is if you just get all the experience you can. Just apply to like in school, if you get the opportunity to do engineering programs, go ahead and do it. I know my uni do a lot. You know, and just if there's like specific work experience, or even just like my part-time jobs taught me that I like working with people. So working in like Subway, that taught me that I like working in people. I guess just trying out everything you can.
Yeah, that's
and
great.
You'll figure it out.
That's great advice. Thank you so much for taking part today. Ben, any advice for the younger generation?
Yeah, I think I heard someone in the last session say basically exactly the same thing as what I'm going to say, which is just sort of keep doing what you enjoy doing. I didn't really have a goal of becoming an engineer and ending up in chemical engineering department, but I just sort of kept doing what I felt mattered to me and what I interested me, and that kind of built the steps of the sort of journey that I've taken. So I think my advice would just be do what you enjoy most, and sort of figure the rest out as you go.
Yeah, I think that is great advice and certainly something that I've also done throughout my career. So Ben, just a final word from you. Not Ben, Ross. Sorry.
I couldn't agree with everybody else more. Find the things you enjoy and do them. It's the best thing you can ever do.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all so much. Thank you for joining us for Protecting with Engineering, part of POP24. We're now going to hand over to the team who are thinking about protecting with maths. Bye for now.